Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Scale with Joy Summit. I am here with Jessica Principe, and she is the CEO and founder of the All Girls Shave Club. I'm so excited for her to share her nuggets of wisdom with you. We were bantering over email before we started getting into this interview, and just now, like many of the speakers, I'm like, wait, hold on, we got to stop talking. I'm going to hit record because I don't want anyone to miss this. This is so good. So Jessica, if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about your background and what brought you to today.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for having me. First of all, I started All Girl Shave Club in late 2016.
Okay.
And All Girl Shave Club is just a shaving subscription service and e-commerce store for shaving and body products for women. Really unique and fun products.
Yes, they are.
We have been running since 2016, and I'm also starting to diversify a little bit and grow into teaching other women who are looking to add a subscription component or e-commerce component to their business as well. So
that's so great. Yes, and you ship thousands of subscribers a month, which is so great. And I mean, you did not start this business that long ago.
No, I still consider myself a baby business, really. It's so hard to kind of wrap my brain around how much it has grown in the last few years, but I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, I would be the same way. And it's so cool that you are, like I said, only been in business for a few years. Many of our speakers have been in business for like 10 or 15 years. I mean, you're into the multiple six figures. Like what do you think are some of the things that you did well? We'll start with that because I know you have some great lessons learned from things that you want to make sure that people hear about. But let's start with what you did well. Like, what did you feel like you did really well to have that type of success in that period of time?
That is such a good question. And I get asked that question a lot, and I love to share because I truly had no experience doing what I'm doing. Like, I came from an educational school background. Like, I was in the operations of a private school. And so I didn't have experience in e-commerce or subscription commerce. So this was brand new for me. And I really had to learn on the fly. I consider myself a self-taught product entrepreneur. But I think the very best thing that I did, and what I'm teaching people to do now, is running a very strong pre-launch. That is like the most important thing. And that is really just testing product market fit before you bring your product to market, before you invest a ton of money and resources into producing a product that maybe nobody will buy. So I worked really hard during my pre-launch days at making sure that I was building up a strong lead list, nurturing that lead list, making sure that I was prepared to meet and even exceed my potential customers' expectations before I spent any money on manufacturing and producing my product.
It's so good. Okay, I want to unpack this for a little bit. Was that hard for you to delay that gratification? Like, were you kind of like, oh, are they going to buy? Are they going to buy? Because that's so good, but so few people do that.
For sure. And I talk about this all the time about how that's like the not sexy part of business, right? We all like want to do the fun stuff. And that's not really the exciting part because it's not instant gratification. So it was super hard, but I knew that it was really important because I didn't want to waste my time or my money or anybody else's.
So were you spending money at that point? Were you making some investments on developing that lead list?
Yeah, a little bit. I was starting to, obviously the software and the tech and the tools that you have to use to do that, we were spending money on. And I was spending a little bit of money on just, product sampling and things like that, photography, producing like mock-ups and things like that. So a little bit of money in the beginning, but mostly I waited to spend until I saw that list growing, until I felt more comfortable that this might have legs.
And did you have a number?
A number of
people? Yeah.
I did. I knew that about 10% of my leads would convert to sales. And so I was really trying to hit that 1,000 mark as far as lead list before I felt like I could pull the plug and launch it.
So good. And I love that you were keeping them warm. Sometimes I go into companies, I do consulting for, brands, like national brands. And sometimes you go in and they haven't communicated with their list in like 6 months. And you're like, oh my gosh, it's like the least expensive, easiest way to make sure that people engage with your message. So, and the other thing too, Jessica, is that you're a faith-based leader. And, just for full transparency of anybody who's listening, I've invited both purpose-based and faith-based leaders here and really asked them to speak openly about how that has played into their decision-making. Was there, how did you balance that with with prayer and faith, and then kind of having these like, okay, when I'm going to launch at this time? Was that something you felt like came from a spiritual side, or was it business, or both?
Absolutely both. So in the beginning, and I always say that having my business and growing my business and even scaling my business has strengthened my faith
Yes.
tremendously. It has just changed my walk with the Lord. And so I absolutely believe that in the beginning, and even through today, I do everything very prayerfully and intentionally, but also learning to kind of tune into my own intuition and what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing happening, and trusting that process.
That's so good. I have a couple notes here. So, what would you say to somebody who would have fear around stepping out into trying something new like what you did?
Yeah, that was a big piece of my journey. So in the beginning, I was so nervous to even start my pre-launch. I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew the direction I wanted to take it, but I was so afraid. I kept having that reel of those thoughts saying, who are you to do this? You have no experience. Like, who's going to buy from you? There's already big brands out there doing something similar. You're crazy. And I didn't know, because I didn't come from this type of background. I didn't know what imposter syndrome was. I didn't know that was a real thing until I went to an event in Tennessee. I learned there about imposter syndrome and fear and all of those things, and how that's just normal. That's like something that everybody experiences. And fear is really not a sign that I'm doing something wrong, or I'm stepping into something that's dangerous, or whatever. It's really just our body's natural reaction to the unknown, and to just move past it, and to recognize that limiting belief, and to learn how to get over it.
Yeah. Were there any specific action steps that you felt like you took to kind of move through it? Or is it just really the awareness of it?
The awareness was a big piece for me, and attending that event where I met other people that were also going through the same thing was a big piece of it, because you can really start to feel very lonely and kind of in your own head, but when you connect with other women and other business owners that are going through the same thing, it just helps to make it easier to get through. It helps to kind of beget some confidence that okay, I'm not crazy, I'm not alone, there's other people suffering here, and we can do this together.
Yes, I really always encourage that. I always say, like, try not to play the lone wolf game. Like, and the busier you get, the easier it's to do that. Do you still struggle with those thoughts today, or have they pretty much subsided?
So I think that at every new level, they peak out again.
Mm-hmm.
Every new challenge and every new level, it comes back. But I do try to stay super surrounded with people that can encourage me and that can help me to kind of squash those things when they're happening.
Yes, that's great. Is that family or other business people, or both?
Both. I'm very, very lucky to have my husband who's super supportive, and he really is my number one cheerleader and can pull me out of those funks and those spirals pretty quick. But I also, Voxer, all of my girlfriends that are, CEOs and things like that, we help each other along.
Yeah, I love Voxer too. If people haven't heard of Voxer, it's so good. It's like, especially if you're on different time zones from people, it's great to be able to touch base with them. It's kind of like a walkie-talkie that you can walk around, and I guess it's the modern day walkie-talkie. That's like, if you have kids that have walkie-talkies, that's basically what it is. So as you were growing, so we started with the launch, right? And now you're growing. And this was about, I guess, 2.5 years ago that you launched?
Yeah.
Okay. So were there other kind of inflection points that you found that you had to kind of reinvent yourself as a leader that you can think of?
That is a good question. Yeah. There are, like we were talking about, there are always new levels that we reach at different periods of business, where you kind of have to take a look at like what you value the most, and make the decisions based on those things, like what your values are. For me, I have to make my decisions based on what I want my customers to experience, what will be the best experience and outcome for my customers, and what aligns the most with my values. And so sometimes that can be really hard when there's so many things coming at you from every direction. But when I focus on those two things, it helps me to stay on the right path.
And then what about like letting go? Because a lot of times people, it's so funny. I had lunch with a friend the other day, and she's recently built her business to 400,000. And I almost feel like that's almost the point where you're starting to be like, okay, I hustled to here. Now it's probably time to start empowering people, delegating, you talk a little bit about like in your leadership, that process of letting go.
That is so hard. And it was so hard for me in the beginning because I like to do things myself. I like to have the control. I know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm capable of doing, and I just want to get it done.
Yeah.
And so when you get to that point where you're like, okay, I can't really do all of this myself and do it well, it's time to bring on somebody and time to start delegating things out. And that was really, really hard for me. I think it came to just trusting that I had to just trust in the process. I had to trust in myself on hiring the right people. I had to trust in them and let them show me that they really can do the things that they say that they can, and let them do that rather than trying to constantly hover and make sure that they're doing it the way I would do it. And those
Yes.
things. That was really hard for me, but I think it's so important to do and to recognize that you just have to let it go and trust that things will work out the way that they're supposed to. Sometimes it doesn't always work out perfectly, but there's always that lesson to learn and, new skills that you can apply the next time.
And then how do you, when you, we chatted a little bit about beforehand about some of the areas in which you really felt like you wanted to share, that was on your heart to share. And one was this around the idea of that we sometimes use control to kind of mitigate fear. And what are some of the ways in which you saw that showing up for you? And then how did you make changes as a result?
That's a great question. So about a year into my business, I was invited to do an interview with CNN about starting a business and how that looked. And I was representing an event called Business Boutique. I had kind of gotten my start at Business Boutique, if anyone's familiar. And so they actually asked me to come down to do this interview where I could share my success story and just kind of do this thing. So they brought me down and I was super nervous. This is the first time I had done any kind of interview, any type of recorded interview, at least on camera. And I remember going down there and just being super nervous. But I wanted to share my story because I wanted to help Business Boutique, but also help other women who were in my shoes because it helped me in the beginning. And so I get there and I'm sitting down in the studio and all the lights and cameras are on me. And I'm so nervous, but I'm trying to push through. And she starts out asking me questions and I'm feeling okay. And then she says, I mentioned that I was afraid. I mentioned the fear thing. And she says, wait a minute, you were afraid? You were really afraid? What were you afraid of? And the way the question came out, it just totally sent me into shock. I just couldn't believe it. And I felt so just small and stupid for even saying that I had been afraid in the first place. And the rest of the interview just tanked. I bombed it. I just did such a bad job. I stuttered through it. I couldn't get myself back in my head. And I cried the whole way home. And I remember saying, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to put myself out there again. I'm never going to do it. And that's where I learned about the control. We often use control as a way to medicate fear, really. And then as it turns out at the end, there was a breaking news story that came and they ended up never airing the whole segment. So they ended up cutting it. But that whole time that I stressed and worried about it, I could have been doing something different with my time and just letting go of that. And I think that often the best antidote to fear is really just surrendering some of that control, because that will beget the confidence to do it again and to keep learning and to keep going.
Oh my gosh, it's such a good example. And I'm so grateful that you're not afraid to share that. Because I think a lot of people feel like with press, that press can be, and I just went like this because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been there. That's what that was. Where like press can be very unpredictable and they can have an angle that you don't know about. And it's not paid advertising. So you don't totally know where they're going to go with it, right? It's not like this where beforehand I was like, okay, what do you want to talk about? It's not a friendly, soft thing because for press, scandalous types of stories are what gets attention, sadly. So in retrospect, kind of knowing that, would have you handled that any differently, or were you just kind of like,
yes, I would have. And now that I have had more experience and I feel more confident in myself and in my business, that I probably would have let it roll off my shoulder now. But in the beginning, it was just such an intense moment and I didn't know how to handle it.
Yeah. Like, would you, in the interview, would have you been like, yeah, I was?
Yes.
Like,
totally.
You started a business?
I would have said all of these Exactly. Fear is so normal. And I'm sure you were afraid at one point too.
Right. Or if you haven't, go take out a line of credit and start a business and we'll talk. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
Right. Or whatever you do, dip into your savings. Or I mean, like, this is not easy. This is not cheap. Like,
Sure.
yeah.
I wish that I could go back and say those things.
Do you? Because this is what I'm saying to you right now. Because I'm like fired up that happened, but like I don't know if I would have said that.
I mean, I think that there could have been a better way to handle it for sure. Yeah, it's okay to be afraid, and I think that the more we can talk about that, the more that it can normalize it for people. I didn't know that other people were struggling with the same things, and it would have been helpful, I think, for somebody to hear that. So
yeah, I mean, what part of my motivation for starting the summit is like I just didn't feel like these conversations were happening. I felt like there was a lot of good conversations about how to get started, but there wasn't a lot of conversations about what really happens once you get started. Totally. And like once things start going well. Yeah. And you and I talked a little bit about before too, this idea of like letting go and letting God, and whether or not you believe in God, or if there's a certain sense of spirituality that you have outside of yourself. Can you speak into that a little bit about like how this fear has shown up, and then how that idea has entered into your leadership and in your life?
Yeah, I think that there's a big thing to be said about this, as far as like that the idea of letting go and letting God, like he is always showing up for me in ways that I don't even feel I deserve at times. Right. And so like we said in the beginning, just truly the whole journey in my business and scaling and growing my business has really been a way as testament of my faith, and has strengthened me in so many ways. And even down to little tiny decisions like, we had to switch platforms. The platform that we were selling on a certain platform called Create that worked really well for us, but we were outgrowing it. And it was so hard for me to just be like, but this is what I know. This is what I like. Yes. This is what I'm comfortable using, to this other big, new, scary thing. But trusting in him and in the process, and in the idea that I want to serve my customers the best that I can, and this is going to be better for them, and having to let go of that control and let it happen.
Yes. I know. I've totally been there and can completely understand. And I have to say, like, there's probably people who are hearing your story about the CNN right now, and they're so grateful that happened to you in a lot of ways, so God has a plan. There's somebody probably listening here that's like, oh my gosh, like I felt shame in that type of moment before, or I felt shame around admitting that this was scary. And, I started to kind of shrink down, but now I realize like, wow, that happened, and with lots of people watching, and like, she's fine. She did great. Yeah. We can survive hard things. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So, today, what are some of the things that you're like most focused on in your business?
Right now, we are actually working on introducing a new product line. So I'm focusing on that right now, and just kind of starting the process and testing and all of that fun stuff. And then I'm also kind of on another track, starting to teach other entrepreneurs who are looking to add a subscription component to their business, or to start a new subscription box business, or even add e-commerce to their business, because it's something I'm super passionate about, and it's given me so much freedom in my life, and I just want that for other women too. Yes,
I totally agree. It's so nice when people can think about new ways to bring their gifts and talents to the world. And while I think it's fine for somebody who just wants to have a small business, and that's amazing, if your heart is to grow and diversify ways that you're delivering your gifts and talents to the world, subscription box is such a smart way to do it. And Jessica's your girl if you're trying to figure out exactly how. So underneath this video, they'll have access to you and information. Is there anything in particular that they would have an opportunity to get to know you in a certain way if they're interested in developing a subscription box?
Yeah, for sure. I put together a dream to launch checklist, and they can download that for free. I think we'll have the link available, and it just will kind of jumpstart them to get started on their subscription box idea. And if they have more questions or anything like that, they're welcome to reach out to me as well.
Yes, we are 100% in a subscription economy. I'm sure anybody who's listening knows that. You might already have a subscription business, but it might not necessarily be a physical box. And there isn't that many people out there that are really teaching you how to do that. So Jessica's a great resource for that. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing. So thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it's going to speak to so many people and just inspiring people that like you can do hard things. You can, start it in a very intentional way and grow it quickly. And you can, still be smiling while you're doing it. So
joy is in the journey, right? After all.
it is. It 100% is. And it's so funny because I've scaled multiple 6 and 7 figure businesses. And that took me a while to figure out is that when you can stop worrying about the next thing and start really just enjoying that you get to do things, you get to grow the business, you get to create a new product line. That's not something you have to do. It's something you get to do. Then, it really reframes it and makes it fun. So
love that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Jessica, for joining us. And make sure, if you're interested in adding a subscription box to your revenue streams, to give Jessica a shout and download the free resource. Thanks so much for joining us with the Scale with Joy Summit.
Thank you.